giving just a rough introduction to the idea of mentoring, supervising, and coaching. They have some similarities and they have some differences. How does that fit in with professional development? How does that allow us to set up productive learning relationships? And also by having professional development and having stronger learning relationships between adults, how do we strengthen our early childhood education programs and the practices that we have in education as well? So if you wanted to, in our textbook, pages 6 through 7 have some really fantastic explanations for these types of relationships. So if you are in a mentoring relationship with someone, you or someone who supports and nurtures the growth of someone else, it typically implies that the mentor has experience in education in the field in which they mentor. So in early childhood education, we have certificated or permitted people who are known to be mentors in our field, and you can have them come out to your programs and support you in various nonprofits, early childhood education programs, community colleges, and other networks like that have mentors who they can send out to support you in educational practices. It's not just for our industry though, and it can also take on different fields as well. For example, I am a volunteer mentor at Cal State San Marcos, where I also teach, and I am a mentor for a first generation college student. I don't know everything about the college systems, enrollment, admissions, but I am familiar enough with campus, and since I teach on campus, enough with the learning environments, that if my mentee or my protege or whatever we want to call her had specific questions about those types of things, I have a big enough network that I can draw upon to help her through her first year at college. A coach is somebody who has a specific expertise or skill who helps to identify and then develop that skills in other people. So we often think of a sports coach who would see somebody playing baseball. They have specific expertise and skill in hitting a bat, setting up teams, running the bases, and then they can identify that in children or in adults and help them develop those skills at bats and with the coach and all of those types of things as well. Then we have a consultant. A consultant is typically somebody who facilitates specific work-related tasks. So for example, my husband works in a medical lab, so a completely different field than education, but he works in a medical lab and they have a consultant come in who works with like processing. So the consultant helps with like making things faster. So if it takes you 15 minutes to do a task, are there ways that you can set up your workspace or your environment or the lab differently to shave 4 minutes off of that task? Because if you do this task 15 times in a day and you shave off that amount of time and X amount of people do it throughout the day, you could be saving conceivably 2 or 3 hours in a business day that employees could be using on other tasks. So that's an example of a consultant. They will help in a specific way, maybe make you do things more efficiently in order to save the company money. And consultants in early childhood education will typically come in maybe about diversity and support us in being more diverse or hiring for more diversity or supporting diverse families. A supervisor, a boss. So we all kind of have experience with this most likely at some point in our life. We have had a supervisor or a boss. So specifically, they monitor and control a process. So in education, they monitor and control the education of children. So in this case, they would set some, with the manager, they would set policies and procedures, and then a supervisor would monitor and control that process. So if you're looking at supervision of children, so you could have 12 kids to one teacher in a preschool classroom, that is the state standard. So a supervisor would monitor and control that process. So they would staff to have appropriate amounts of children to teachers, and they would also monitor and walk through and make sure that all children are being supervised. So that's an example of what a supervisor does in education. I do have a caveat for this as well. If a supervisor acts in the role of a mentor or a coach, they should also examine some ethical issues of supervising and mentoring. And ethical issues are at the very end of class after we've kind of immersed ourselves in the idea of supervising, coaching, and mentoring others. We'll take a deeper dive into some ethical considerations, but I do like to put it out there. A lot of times supervisors are asked to support, to mentor, to teach people skills, to develop skills, to nurture growth in other people. And when we think of a boss, that's a good boss is typically somebody who has some certain characteristics of both mentoring, coaching, and consulting. So they have a lot of different hats they wear as a good supervisor. But we also need to look at some of the ethical issues if you're both supervising and mentoring. So a lot of times with a mentor, you're meeting somebody where they're at. So maybe they're not the best at teaching right now, and instead of punishing them for not being the best that they can be, you support and nurture their growth. As a supervisor, that can be problematic if somebody's telling you, I'm having a hard time supervising children. As a supervisor, that can be difficult to hear because that's our number one priority when we have young children, is that they are being adequately supervised. So you might not be able to grow and nurture and meet that person where they're at because you have to then have on your employee hat. That it's problematic that this person can't do this and I need you to start supervising right away, and you might not have the skills and ability to also support and nurture their growth. We'll take a deeper dive, like I said, later in the semester, but I do like to bring this up from the beginning to acknowledge that there are some power imbalances in a supervisor or an employer-employee relationship. And for a lot of us, there's power imbalances in everything. If we were to meet face-to-face, or I did this class lecture-based, I typically talk about the power imbalances. I try to be a very inclusive, active teacher. So I want to hear from everybody in my classroom. I think that we all have very valuable insights and perspectives on education. But at the end of the day, there is a power imbalance. I am the teacher. I'm going to give you a grade. I can pass or fail you in this class. So I have to acknowledge that as well. We can develop a relationship and hopefully it would be reciprocal, but at the end of the day, I always will have some kind of power imbalance or authority over somebody, and it's very ethical and very right and appropriate for me to acknowledge that and see how that changes how I teach as well. When we're looking at differences in between mentors and supervisors as well, a mentor, the word that we typically associate with them are a guide. They help you reflect. They come from a place of analysis. You're doing this now, how could we change it? And then also a lot of emotional support as you try to be a better teacher. A supervisor typically is a hirer and a firer. So they interview a lot of people, they bring them on board, they train them. And then if the employee cannot fulfill the job requirements necessary for the job, then they will be terminated from employment as well. They also have evaluations and assessments that they have to conduct on classrooms, on children, and on their employees as well. They typically engage in some kind of salary negotiations as well. Most people in our field want to give raises and they want to raise the wages that we make because for some people it's very low. It's not a living wage. And I think most people in our industry understand that and are trying to make inroads and try to pay the best that they can. But you also pay somebody, you give them salary, and that would be the person that you would negotiate with if you needed more salary. A good supervisor might have, like I said, some characteristics. We would expect that they offer you some support, either in your personal life or in the classrooms as well. And they might also help you guide, reflect, or look at your teaching practice from a place of analysis on what you do and don't do. So if we're thinking back to a great boss that we had in a preschool or an after-school program, or when we were working with infants and toddlers, we typically want some of those mentor characteristics along with strong supervisory and management roles as well. So that's where it can be a little tricky. I think that it's the best thing that we can do is first acknowledge if there is any power imbalances, if there's any ethical considerations like I just talked about. And then I think we need to structure learning relationships. So as a supervisor, as an employee, as a protege, as a mentor, a coach, or a supervisor, how do you want to work with your employees, your proteges, or your students? So anybody who wants to learn with you. I think at the beginning, you're going to discuss some ground rules, and they will give as much as you give in this kind of mutually agreed upon guidelines. Typically, when we're looking at them, we're talking about participation, when you will get together, how much you will talk, what you will discuss, respect, that both sides will respect the time of the other, the commitment of the other, and their differences, values, past experiences, skills and knowledge that maybe color how they think about teaching. If you are an employer with an employee, you need to recognize the power differences, that you pay their salary, and that some of the coaching and mentoring relationship you might not be able to give them. And if they really need it, you might have to search elsewhere within our networks, asking me or other community college instructors if they can hook you up with a mentor for your employees so that you can support them that way. A great thing as well is to be confidential with any employee. Of course, you're going to be very confidential, especially if they're sharing personal issues, but also in the mentoring and coaching parts of relationships as well. When you are engaging in a process of reflection on teaching and then making changes to your teaching practice, you need to be confidential with what is shared with you about their challenges, their strengths, their triumphs, and their vulnerabilities. Listening, pausing, and allowing others to speak and to tell you about their experiences, listening well and being able to reflect on what they say before you speak. On page 14 of the textbook, there's more information about each of these kind of subsections as well. That's why I do like the book. I think it does give you some concrete ways that if you were struggling with respect or participation, things that you could say or talk to with your protege or your employee or your student to better structure a good learning relationship. That's reciprocal, it's a two-way street, you both give and take from it. So it is an online class. If we were in class, in a lecture-based class, I would probably give you time to think about, have you ever been a mentor? When were you a mentor? Or maybe a time that you have been mentored yourself. What kind of guidelines that we just talked about it made it successful? Or if it wasn't a successful relationship, what made it not successful? So did you not feel supported? Did you not feel guided? Was there no time for reflection? Were there power imbalances that were really difficult to get over? I think when we engage in learning partnerships that are going to be better strengthened when both people engage in a process of self-reflection and then enter into this learning relationship coming at a place of kind of mutual respect and admiration for each other. So that requires some speaking at the beginning, having a discussion about it, talking about what you would like to get out of it and the parameters of the relationship. So when I am a mentor for a first generation college student, I like to meet off campus, so typically at a restaurant, somewhere maybe not like Starbucks, it's a little bit quieter, maybe a little bit more private as well, and then we just kind of chat and talk. You know, who am I? You know, I'm a mom. I live here. I do this. This is the places that I work. What about you? Listening to them, and then just kind of talking about what do you need from me? You're in your first year of college. Has it been overwhelming? Has it been fantastic? Has it been a mixture of both? What kind of support are you looking for? And then I tell them what I can offer. So we'll meet. I would like to meet twice a month. I would like to meet for an hour to 2 hours at a time. I'm going to take small notes as we're talking just to jog my memory about things that I need to do for you. So if you're wanting to become a lawyer in the next couple of years, maybe I'll look up law programs in the Southern California area so we can see what kind of classes you might have to take now, what kind of counselors would you need to talk to in order to get to your goal of becoming a college student in law school. So I like to say what I'm going to provide for you, and then I say from you, I'd like you to be on time. When I email you, please respond back to me so I know what times we're going to be meeting. This is just a confidential process where we are both supporting each other in a college environment. What do you need from me? What kind of parameters would you like to set up with me as your mentor in a college system? So that's an example of kind of how I do it in a volunteer position that I hold outside of my work hours as well. So you might want to reflect on a time that you were mentored, what made it successful or not, or maybe you have been a mentor. How do you structure your learning relationships, and then what could you do to make them better? We're going to segue into adult learning. Everyone, and I think that we can all agree, all humans have the capacity to learn and grow over their lifespan. So that whole idea of teaching a dog new tricks is definitely true. We all have a capacity to learn and to grow over our lifespan. But the way that we show it, the way that we learn, is very different for each person and each human, and very much this class is centered towards teaching and learning with adults. So it might take a different length of time as well, depending on commitments and life situations that people have. They might be busy and it might take them longer than we might think that it should take them. We're going to look at multiple intelligences, and we're going to look at the universal design for learning and how that plays into adult learning and how we can support each other as we are learning and supervising. All right, so with adult learners, so this is the types of multiple intelligences. So Mark Vital made this nice graphic for us, but it was definitely based on the work of Howard Gardner. He was one of the first people to kind of come up with all of these types of things. So we have spatial, we have a naturalist, we have musical, logical, mathematical. A newer one is like existential or spiritual. We have interpersonal, bodily kinesthetic, linguistic, and intrapersonal. So these are all the different types of ways that people learn. You can learn through music, you can learn through moving and doing, you can learn by talking to somebody, you can learn by reflecting on each other. So if not everybody learns in the same way, and there is a lot of different ways that we can learn, what does this say about you and your employees or the people that you coach and supervise? Think about staff meetings. How do you conduct staff meetings, and would it meet the needs of a variety of learners? How do you communicate daily? Is it only in written form? Is it only in verbal? How could it maybe get somebody who's a bodily kinesthetic who likes to learn by doing? How would it be somebody who's logical, mathematical, musical, or likes to be outside? In services as well, typically long days, Saturdays, Sundays, or after work, when we engage in professional development related to child development theory, educational theory, and improving our teaching practice. Is it very spatial? Is it very linguistic? What are the ways that you're meeting those needs? So I just put this up. This is how I remember the multiple intelligences. So I imagine a cowboy or two cowboys, Slim, so S-L-I-M, and then Bill with just one L. So that's how I think of it. So I think of two cowboys out on the range. You know, a cowboy's always named Slim. So there's Slim and there's Bill. And this is how I remember it. So it's just a mnemonic to kind of help you remember it. So it's S for spatial. So kind of 3D learning, geometry, graphic, what are kind of the visual things that we see through our eyes, and how do we receive information and learning that way. Logical, mathematical for the L, so L for logical. So this would be people who learn through equations, through numbers, so very kind of mathematical minded as well. Algebra, calculus, things like that. Then we have intrapersonal and we have interpersonal. So intrapersonal is with other people, speaking, talking, people person. Musical for M is obviously rhythm. So this type of thing would get people's attention. Clicking, having a bass going on in a classroom, sometimes like that. We know that people can engage more in things that we're saying if we do it in a rhythmic way, or with children, how many children learn the ABCs by singing the ABCs. We have so many songs and rhythms for children because we know that they learn that way. Same for adults. Some adults learn very musically as well, or with a rhythm. And for naturalistic, like to be outside, like to be in the natural world, can look at trees and see patterns within leaves. They can see how the organisms are growing. Why is it dying? How I can change it. People who are known to have green thumbs are very science, biology, ecology minded as well. Then we have bodily kinesthetics. These are the people who need to move and learn by doing something. You can't just tell them about changing a baby's diaper the appropriate way. They need to actually do it in order to learn it. Interpersonal, so within yourself. So that is somebody who needs to reflect, who needs to write, who needs to journal, who needs to think about things. And then we also have linguistic as well, so somebody who likes to talk and who likes to hear things as well. So somebody who's like a very verbal learner, and then also enjoys speaking, writing, giving speeches. So why do I bring up all of these multiple intelligences? Because you need to plan for them in your professional development or within your learning relationship. When I'm teaching in a lecture, it's a little bit more difficult online, although I do try to have discussion boards, I try to have Pinterest, I try to have visuals, I try to have movies. As much as I can in a little box that you have to look into, I try to plan for some multiple intelligences. That's why I started kind of doing these videos for people who need more human contact or are more visual. They have reported that they like seeing my face as I'm talking and not just hearing my voice. They like to see me and my hands and all the things that I do. So I plan for 4, especially in lectures. So in a lecture that I would give, an hour and a half or 3 hours, however long it is, I would plan for 4 multiple intelligences. So maybe I would have a video playing. I might get up and have students walk around the room and engage in learning by doing. I might have a song at the end that reinforces the knowledge and understanding about children. And then I would also give a traditional lecture where I talk and there are words up on the screen so somebody can see it and can hear it as well. So that's kind of the way that I plan my lectures. So we always, when we're talking about teaching or active teaching, we're planning for 4. So if you were doing an in-service or a staff meeting or something where you have a lot of different people and you're going to assume that a lot of them have multiple intelligences, plan for 4 or 5 of those intelligences. So there's things up on the screen, people are doing things, there might be a song playing, you're speaking, like there's a lot, like within a 2-hour staff meeting, you've done a lot of different activities that support different learners. That's going to make sure that people are staying engaged, staying active, and hopefully taking some of the knowledge that you need to impart on them. And it might be really dry stuff. A lot of staff meetings can be dry. You know, they're very policy and procedure, but if you try to keep it active and you try to hit those multiple intelligences, people will enjoy it more. They won't complain about coming as much, and hopefully you'll get some of that really important knowledge, that important employee knowledge, like supervise kids, sanitize, all that type of stuff, get it into their heads better, so you don't have to do as much monitoring and controlling in the classroom in the moment. So we also have Universal Design for Learning, or UDL for short. This is definitely came out of our work with special education and special needs children. It is looking at the what, the how, and the why of learning. And there's about 13 to 14 principles that are very specific to Universal Design for Learning. We're not going to go all over them. I want to just hit the big parts. So we're looking at the what of learning. So this is over here on your left-hand side. How can we gather facts and categorize what we see, hear, and read? Identifying letters, words, or an author's style are recognition tasks. So typically if you give somebody something to read or to listen to, we're wanting them to pick out the facts and categorize them as well. So the fact is you have to supervise children. These are the ratios: 12 to 1, 6 to 1, 4 to 1, whatever the ratios might be in your own particular family home that you're providing daycare in, or the military system, state funded. There are lots of different ratios. So if you need to get that through to somebody, that's a lot of the what of learning. Then we have the how of learning. So how we organize and express our ideas. So for some people as multiple intelligences, they're going to need to figure out the best way for them to organize and express their ideas. It might be writing a paper, it might be solving math problems, and especially if you're engaged in coaching or mentoring, a lot of this is the how of learning. So identifying, because it's typically a one-on-one or a smaller group relationship when you're not a supervisor and you're a mentor coach and you're in that role. So you are helping people identify the best ways that they can be learners. So how do you learn? How do you absorb information? How is this going to help you reflect on your teaching and become a better teacher? And then the why of learning, how, and this is once again goes back to how do we teach so that you're challenged, you're excited, you're interested. We hit all the multiple dimensions, multiple intelligences, so that you are engaged and active in your learning process. We know that when students are active and engaged, it sticks in their brain, they retain that knowledge, and then hopefully they're able to go into their classrooms and put it into practice. So adult learners and UDL are Universal Design for Learning. The big thing is that I like to set my workplace up like a classroom. My classrooms, because I believed in inclusion, I made my best effort for them to be fair and accessible for everybody. So my learning space accommodated a lot of different learners. So my staff meetings, how I spoke with people, I tried to get a sense of who they were, either as a mentor or coach or as a supervisor. Who are my employees? How do they learn? So I can set up learning environments so that they can accessibly learn from me and know what I wanted from them as a supervisor. I think a big thing with universal design as well is that we start from a place of seeing who we work with and valuing them for what they bring to the workplace. So everybody is going to have different strengths. Everybody is going to have different vulnerabilities, and that's part of the joy of human diversity. That is also readily apparent in workplaces. Certain people will have classrooms that are very neat and clean and organized and labeled. They have fantastic classroom environments. They're beautiful. They're light filled. There's art all over the place. They take a lot of joy and satisfaction in understanding and seeing the physical world around them and how a beautiful environment can set children up for good learning in a classroom. Then we have other people who might have a bit of a messier environment, but they have wonderful interactions with the children. One-on-one, constantly getting down at their level, looking them in the eye, just discussing with them. Then in another classroom, we might have people that engage in such wonderful parent education. Their parents always leave happy and satisfied. They're chatted with every day. They take learning and learning experiences home. They feel supported and welcomed. So we all have our strengths, seeing what your employees' strengths are and capitalizing on it. So if somebody is fantastic, once again, at having a beautiful like Project Reggio classroom, how can they support the other people in the school? How can they come out of their classrooms and teach that knowledge and skill set to other people as well? They might have some vulnerabilities as well. Maybe they're not as great as communicating what they're doing to the parents. So maybe they can learn from somebody else. So when we're seen and valued for who we are and the strengths that we bring, that can set us up as well for a really great workplace as well. And then with universal design for learning is the idea that from the very beginning, you prioritize different types of learning. So when you're writing policy and you're writing procedures, and then when you're planning on presenting it, because if it's new, you're gonna have to train everybody. This is a new requirement. There's gonna take some time and learning process for something new, or it's always been there, but you never paid attention to it, or you've forgotten it, or you were supposed to be doing family style dining, back burner, haven't cared in a lot of months, notice that nobody's doing it anymore. So you're going to have to represent all of this information again, and you're going to want to set it up so that every single person has the opportunity to the best of their knowledge, be able to access that presentation. So presentations are very flexible. They use a lot of multiple, like you're watching a video, you're looking at words, you're hearing somebody talk. They're very explicitly presented. So a lot of times what I found with people doing their staff meetings is they're like really rushed, like 30 minutes before I got to do a PowerPoint. Maybe do 30 minutes on Monday, 30 minutes on Tuesday, 30 minutes on Wednesday, and then on Thursday, do an extra hour. The more that you see it and you come back refreshed, you can say, oh, I could have explained this a little bit differently. When I was doing my own presentation for this lecture, I forgot that I have my mnemonic for multiple intelligences. So I added another one, which was Slim and Bill, the two cowboys, how I remember what the multiple intelligences are. And feel free to use it as well if that's a great way for you to remember it as well. Then we have a learning space that accommodates students and instructional methods. So for our bodily and kinesthetic, letting them stand up throughout the whole staff meeting, especially if you've been at class all day. And now you have a staff meeting after work, maybe you're hungry and you need to serve snacks and people need to sit down, and first they need to socialize, that the people that are people persons can have that kind of interaction. So how are you going to bring in things so that their instructional methods or your staff meetings or just your communication with people is strengthened by seeing them with their multiple intelligences? Then we have, this is for students typically, but we provide supportive work environments. Where people have their social and emotional needs met to the best of everybody's ability. They feel like they're part of a family. They feel supported by other people. Minimizing unnecessary physical effort. So kids should not be picked up and put on changing tables. There should be the stairs so that they can go ahead and get up. That's kind of ergonomics. Most places have all of that type of stuff, but it's ergonomics 101. We don't want to have our staff doing unnecessary physical effort when we can set up systems so that they're not getting hurt trying to take care of infants and toddlers. So that it's just it for universal design for learning. If any of you work with special education, you're probably aware of this for students, but I like to think of it with our staff as well, because we can all be helped if our supervisors are thinking of our needs before they even engage in a planning process. They know who works for them or who they're coaching or they're mentoring, and they are changing how they present the information to best meet employee needs. I just want to dive into a little bit of professional development and adult learning as well. So I just want to go over this. Katz it's Lillian Katz, and she wrote a model of teacher development. So typically in your first year, you are in survival stage. So I was 19, my first year of teaching, had a classroom of 12 3-year-olds all by myself, and it was just survival. Like, get to the end of the day, nobody gets hurt, no parents yell at me, like, we just got to get through this. I've just got to learn how to work with 3-year-olds on a daily basis, 40 hours a week. I needed a lot of on-set support and technical assistance, which I didn't really receive in that job. So I went back to school at night at a community college so that I can continue to have more than 12 units, know a little bit more about kids. I was really glad that after my 12 units, the next class I took was on art, and that really helped me start focusing on the fun parts of teaching. And also the kids really enjoyed it, and the more engaged they were, the less kind of pressure on me. So that was a big part of my first stage of teaching, was getting out of survival by increasing my education, because I didn't get it from my supervisor. And that's why I'm kind of passionate about this. There are times in my career where I can think back to not having the support that I needed that would have made me a better teacher. So I want you guys that are taking this class to go out and supervise adults really well and provide the things that maybe we didn't get. In stage 2, typically it's consolidation. So, you've got, problems happen. You're still not the best. You're still learning. You're probably in your first or second year. You still need support, but you probably have a basic understanding of how children learn, grow, and need to be educated. You've talked to parents before. A lot of these things you have encountered before. So you have some experience to draw on, but you probably need to talk to a specialist, a colleague. You need advice. You need a consultant. Something like that to support you as new problems are starting to come out, because you're still fairly new. In stage 3, you've been doing this for a couple of years, and maybe you're starting to get bored. There's no more problems. You don't have that kind of adrenaline surge anymore. So you need some renewal. You need some refreshment. You see some new ideas. You've been doing this same unit, always the same, and you want to go to a conference or some professional development, or read a new journal, or go to a lab school and see how they're doing it, in order to get some great ideas so you can be a better active participant in your classroom, to set up for active learning, to communicate with parents better, all of these types of things. Typically in maturity though, you have a couple more years of teaching under your belt. I would say even more than 4, maybe 5 or 6. And now you can start to look at the larger picture, because you can start to see the institutional issues that are maybe affecting early childhood education. Issues with licensing, so community care licensing, what they tell us, is it always right? Sometimes are they not seeing the big picture themselves? Maybe looking at NIAC, maybe looking at the accreditation process. So seeing things with a new idea and being able to look at some institutional issues, maybe issues with barriers when it comes to diversity and things like that. So by going to seminars, institutes, having a professional network, going and reading more from books and journals and conferences, you're maybe better to take on a mentoring and coaching role yourself, to speak out against some injustice or inequalities that you see within our systems. So that's the type of thing that you're working on. So depending on my employee, my protege, whoever they are, whatever stage they're in, that's going to mean that I'm a different supervisor, I'm a different coach, or I'm a different mentor. So how I'm going to relate to somebody who's in survival is going to be very different than somebody who's in maturity. What I provide to them, what they need from me, the support I give, the coaching that I give is different depending on each of these stages. So when you're reflecting on your employee, or you're reflecting on your mentee, or you're reflecting on the person that you coach, reflect on which stage do you think that they are at, or even asking them, do you feel like you're still in survival, or do you feel like you're in consolidation and you might need something different from me? Showing this to them and saying, where are you? Where do you feel like you fit in? And what of these things, these resources at the bottom, do you need from me in order for you to be a better employee, to provide better education, or so that I can help you get to the next stage if I'm your coach or mentor? All right, so we know that Erikson, Erik Erikson, also huge stage theorist. If you're not familiar with him, please look him up. It's Erik, E-R-I-K, and then Erikson, E-R-I-K-S-O-N. He's got a lot of information online. He's very Googleable, and you can find lots of information on him. But his theory really goes beyond childhood, and that gives us clues. Typically in child development, in TEDS and in CDE, we are looking at specific stages. So we're looking at infancy, early childhood, preschool, school age, and adolescence. So you know those 5 stages of Erikson's theories. We sometimes don't look at the other ones as well. We don't examine where we are. We don't look at where our employees are or our proteges as well. So in young adulthood, it's intimacy versus isolation. So there's always a crisis in Erikson's work, and if you engage in a process or you start to grow and learn and develop, you will hit intimacy. And if you don't, and you engage in this crisis, but you don't come out of it without kind of having this process of working through a crisis and changing who you are socially and emotionally, you could be isolated or lonely. So in young adulthood, we're looking for fulfilling relationships, friendships, marriage, and then work relationships as well. So there's a need for other people. There's a need for connection and intimacy in all areas of our life when we are young adults. Middle adulthood, that's me right now. I'm definitely, it's generativity versus stagnation. So I want to give back. I want to find purpose, and I want to know what my purpose is and give it back to others. So I found a lot of purpose in my teaching to people. I found it in my volunteer work, volunteering at the university, and also as a mentor, and then I also volunteer at my children's elementary school as well. So I'm finding a lot of purpose in education. What I know about education, I'm trying to give it back to people. And then older adults, so people who maybe are on the tail end of their teaching career, but who still have a lot to give us and a lot to learn as well, want to look back on their life and see a life that has been well lived with purpose and has given back to other people. So I'm working with the teacher at the elementary school. She's been at the school for 28 years. She's anticipating retiring in about 5 or 6. And in the next 5 or 6 years, she wants to start a garden program at the elementary school. She's been at the school most of her career, and so she really, really wants to leave a legacy and leave the school better than when she entered it. So when we are looking at our employees, looking at our proteges as well, we want to look at which of Lily and Katz's stages of teaching are they in, survival, collaboration, the ones that I just talked about in the previous slide, and then also maybe looking at what Erik Erikson would say about their stages of social and emotional development. Are they a young adult, a middle adult, or an older adult as well? And what would that tell us about what they need from us? Are they very young and they're still trying to find fulfilling relationships, or are they a little bit older and getting ready to retire and want to know that they're leaving a legacy behind? So I'm going to talk about mentoring and coaching with adult learners. There's this guy called Malcolm Katz, and he talks about the art and the science of teaching, and this is in our textbook as well. And when he talks about adult learners, he's identified a couple of characteristics that really help people learn as adults. They have to have certain personality characteristics, and they include being self-directed, having access to resources, both material, so they have something to draw on, they have a lot of books in their classrooms, or they have lots of, they attend workshops, they just have some resources related to teaching. And then some of them are intangible as well, like resources that we draw on socially and emotionally, like who keeps your well full? Do you have friends and family around? Do they support you in your workplace? That type of stuff are materials and resources that are not financial, they're not as readily seen, but they're very important to how we are. They're motivated by the needs of others, so the children in their programs, the families that they serve, the job, and the fellow friends that they have at their jobs, friends outside of the workplace, and then their community as well. They're interested, or they enjoy learning, so they're interested in learning more about their learning process in order to give it to children, or they have a legitimate, real joy that they receive after learning something. And then typically they're pragmatic as well. They're focused on real world problems. So maybe less of the philosophical issues and more of, I want to be a better teacher. How do I do that? So this is kind of what Malcolm Katz identified as some of those characteristics. Do you have some of them? And people that you're working with or supervising right now, would you say that they have any? And how can we start to maybe identify and support people in getting the characteristics that they don't have? So if you're a supervisor, so that was very much coaching and mentoring on that previous page. So as a supervisor, it's a little bit more difficult. Sometimes we want to meet them where they are, but at the same time, as a supervisor, as an employer, as somebody who pays wages, your employees need to understand what you're telling them, and then they have to translate it to the work of children. So if employees are resistant to change, or it takes them a longer time to understand some of the information, or they learn in very diverse ways, you're going to have to support them a little bit more, because you know that you have to get this information to them and they have to put it into practice. So they have to know about supervising children, what ratios are, how tricky it is on the playground. If you walk from your classroom to the playground, how do you do that? There's a lot of issues with the supervision of children. Your employees need to know this, and they need to be able to put it into practice. So as a supervisor, you have to ensure this. And if they are incapable of supervising children with repeated and different ways of teaching them, then you're going to have a plan of action, or you're going to have to put them on a performance plan, or you might even have to talk about termination as well. So that's kind of the ethical dilemma between being a coach and a mentor and being a supervisor. You can't just be a supportive, reflecting, helpful presence as a supervisor, because you pay the bills, you pay your employees, and as somebody who has been contracted to provide childcare has to be done right. So that's some of the issues that we will start to discuss as well. Some employees also might be really resistant to change as well. So maybe it's not child supervision, or not as dramatically important as that, but it's something like art, and they're really resistant to art. Kids don't art. Why should they have fun? They're kids. They play all day long. Why should I do art too? Or sand and water, that's just a mess. I don't like to clean up messes. I've been working here all day. I'm really tired. I want to go home. I don't want to sweep sand at the end of the day. So where do you get that? You want to support them. You want to reignite that spark and that interest in learning and supporting kids. But if they're really resistant to change as well, you're also going to have to reflect on how important is this to you, and how far are you willing to go in having them understand that, and will you put them on a performance plan? Will you do a plan of action? So we need to work on the ways that we teach and support employees. We need to help them reignite their passion for this teaching work. But then also supervisors, we do have the difficult considerations of when is somebody maybe not ready for this job, maybe somebody is not right for this particular position in your particular school as well. So in conclusion, I really want to establish the type of relationship that you're going to have with another adult. Am I your employer? I'm going to try to support you, but I'm also your employer who pays your bills, and there are certain things that I need to be done. Or am I outside of that relationship, and I'm going to coach, mentor, I'm going to meet you where you are, I'm going to nurture, support you as you identify these skills and help you bloom and grow as a teacher. So there's kind of while there's some overlap between a coach and a mentor and a supervisor, there are some areas of distinction as well. We also want to meet the multiple needs of every person in our educational system, be it child, family, or adult as well. So in our classrooms, when we know we're meeting the needs of the children, we're planning for the ways that children learn in multiple modalities. We also want to do that for the adults who work for us as well. That's it for this week. I will see you guys online. Thanks so much.